Good morning, fathers of daughters. Welcome to another live stream. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to Grow That YouTube channel. This is your boy, FMB Martin. I am here for another live stream, fathers of daughters. Mi amigos, bienvenidos aquí hoy. Gracias. All right, fathers, we have another live stream today. And fathers, what we're going to be discussing is, what are your feelings on paying students to attend school? What are your thoughts on that, fathers? We're going to have a discussion. I'm going to show about 10 videos with you today. They're anywhere from 2 minutes to about 7 minutes long. So it's going to be a good live stream. All my live streams are good, but fathers of daughters, what are your thoughts about kids being paid to attend school? Are your thoughts that parents should be held accountable if their kids aren't attending school? Are your thoughts maybe that it's okay to pay children to attend school? Because, you know, that could be controversial, right? Depending on how you were raised, what environment you come from, what your family values are, what your economics are, what your economic class is, right? Because since I don't do politics, you have those on the left, the Democrats, you have those on the right, Republicans, and then you have people in the middle like myself who are independents. And it's interesting when you speak to people about paying children to attend school. Now, I worked in K-12 education for 10 years. I'm a former teacher, dean of students, and restorative justice coordinator, working in middle school and high school. So this came up quite a bit, actually, because when I worked in different public schools, K-12 education here in Colorado, that's where I graduated high school. I graduated high school from Denver Public Schools. So the middle schools that I worked in the high school that I worked in, they were schools of color, right? And we had poor kids. We had a lot of poor children. We had kids that were not doing too well because they were in poverty. Their families were in poverty. So when you think about the economics of education, public education, I'm not talking about private, I'm talking about public education, you're going to get different views from different people. You're going to get a lot of different views for those rich people who have money and are able to send their children to private schools, where a lot of them can afford that. You have poor people. You have kids, white and black, Latino, Asian, Native American. They're poor. They go to public schools. And they don't have a lot of the same resources that many of these suburban schools have. Inner city schools, what I'm going to be showing you through videos when I'm talking about Title I money and how schools are funded by the federal government. It's going to be explained to you today. I'm an individual that doesn't believe in reinventing the wheel, fathers of daughters. So through education, instruction, and information, I provide visualization for fathers to understand what our sense of urgency must be in order for our children to become successful, in order for our daughters to become successful. Now, I focus on daughters because I'm a grow dad. I'm a grow dad of 4 daughters, 36, 30, 26, and 24. So my focus is on fathers of daughters, grow dads. And this is how I give back. A totally different transition in my life. I'm 59 years of age. So all of my daughters are adults. They're in their professional careers. And by the grace of God, they're all doing very, very well. So I address fathers of daughters, right? And one of my goals is to help fathers understand not only our sense of urgency, but how we build long-term sustainable relationships with our baby girls. And it begins birth to 18 years of age. Because fathers, if we're not a part of their life, a lot of things will come into their life and can happen to them. So when we're talking about paying children to attend school, like I said, you're going to get different views depending on where you fall on the economic scale, I believe. And it's challenging for a lot of kids culturally. And it's challenging for a lot of kids economically. Kids didn't ask to be born into the families they were born into. That's where they were born. They don't get to pick their parents. Children never get to pick their parents. They're born into families. And that's who they end up with. So not all families are created equal. They're just not. Not all education is created equal. It just isn't. I also worked in the criminal justice system for 20 years. So I was on the back end of the criminal justice system as a state juvenile probation officer, state of Colorado, and on the front end of education. I'd much rather be on the front end of education than the back end of the criminal justice system, because the school to prison pipeline is real. I've already made a video where I've addressed the school to prison pipeline in K-12 education, because I know there's a lot of adults. I know there's a lot of folks out there that don't believe that there's a school to pipeline education, but trust and believe there is a school to pipeline education. And I saw that a lot, not only in K-12 education, but I saw it a lot when I was a state juvenile probation officer. So, fathers, I need your attention today. I want you to be able to process these videos I'm going to share with you. The first 3 videos I'm going to share with you is talking about paying kids to attend school. The state of Ohio, through legislation, bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans have come up with a bill that they would like to implement and pass to start paying kids to go to school in Ohio. It's very interesting, right? So the first 3 videos I'm sharing with you today, fathers of daughters, it's talking about paying kids to attend school. And feel free to comment. Feel free to leave your messages with me. I would love to share them, fathers of daughters. All fathers, regardless of your ethnic group, background, and or culture, you're always welcome here at Grow That YouTube channel. I appreciate you all, fathers. All right? Let's get into these videos, fathers, and let's check them out.
Show up for class and get paid. That's at the center of a bipartisan bill in the Ohio House right now. To try, they're hoping to reduce the number of kids who don't show up for class.
But as you can imagine, very controversial, and its sponsors spoke about it today. WLWT News 5's John London is here with how it would work. Are we going to have NIL deals for kids taking science classes here?
That's a pretty good question. They're not sure how this is going to work, Mike, but they want to test it out and see. So a couple of pilot programs are being set up, one to boost, or would be set up, one to boost attendance, the other to boost graduation rates. Now, interested districts would have to apply. Only 4 to 8 urban and rural schools would be selected. Only kindergarten and 9th grade students would be eligible at first. If it pays off, so to speak, it could spread to other grades.
The notion of paying kids to show up for class might strike some as rash, costly, and ridiculous, but not to this 19-year-old Don South senior and his circle of friends.
Oh, they'll be all in. They'll be all in. We had a conversation a little about, well, I said like a month ago about this, because the winter time was coming up. And people was like, they ain't want to show up because they gonna be cold, and other kids ain't got coats and stuff to be prepared for the winter. So majority of them just don't come to school.
Those last few words illustrate a nationwide problem. In the previous school year, the chronic absentee rate in Cincinnati public schools was nearly 46%. Since August through the first quarter of this year, it's 38.5%. Incentives like free pizza and Visa gift cards have been tried without long-lasting success. Are direct cash payments worth a try?
You think it'll be a motivation?
It'll be a motivation, yeah. Because what kid doesn't want money?
Students with at least 90% attendance would receive roughly $50 a month with extra cash incentives upon graduation.
We're not teaching them to read if they're not there. We can't teach them math if they're not there.
Democrat Dunny Isaacson believes whatever side of the spectrum you're on, it's not relevant, especially if you consider it a waste of money.
It is so much less expensive to invest in making sure that kids are getting to school than it is to pay the costs for when kids don't go to school.
From Columbus, Republican Bill Seitz is co-sponsoring House Bill 348.
In seventh grade social studies, our teacher used to say, money isn't everything, kids, but always remember this, it's way ahead of whatever's in second place.
Savion Lively has a winter coat and a show-up mindset.
Ready to learn, get my education and graduate, take on the real world.
Statewide, nearly a third of Ohio students are chronically absent. CPS not commenting about House Bill 348, which was introduced this afternoon. And to those who ask why pay students for something they should be doing anyway, Isaacson and Seitz answer because nothing else has worked. John London, WLWT News 5.
As young as 5 could get paid just by showing up to class. As young as 5 could get paid just by showing up to class.
The proposed Ohio law would pay $25 to select kindergarten and ninth grade students for attending class at least 9 of 10 days during a 2-week span.
So students who keep up a 90% attendance rate could earn hundreds by the end of the year.
That's right. Just to mention, if you had a lot of kids, you could make a lot of money. Pete Hegseth has a lot of kids. Pete, I'm sure you think this is just a fantastic idea. Now we are reduced to, if we want kids to go to school, which costs taxpayers a fortune, we're going to have to pay the kids to show up.
It's not a bad idea, Steve. I mean, I should move to Ohio,
right?
Send my kids to this program,
You'd be
and
rich.
then collect the money once I make sure once they attend 90% of classes, I'll collect the money. What a sign of the times when you step back and think about how far we've fallen. First of all, we're trying it with 5-year-olds or kindergartners. If I ask my 5-year-old, how much did the car cost? He'd be like, 40, 100,000 million. You know, I don't know that they really know what $25 is per se. And then a ninth grader, just because you're getting paid to enter into the doors of a school doesn't mean you're actually going to learn or be invested in your classes. So, okay, you're there, you're not getting into trouble somewhere else. This is ultimately an attempt yet again to replace the role of parents. I mean, I hate to come back to this, but ultimately, a lot of these kids that are not showing up from school are coming from broken homes, where the mother or the father or neither are not putting a boot in their you-know-where and saying, in this family, we show up. And the school districts aren't holding the parents accountable. There are laws against truancy.
Yeah,
there are laws against kids not showing up to school to a certain age. And as a result, those laws should be enforced against parents who don't ensure their kids show up to school.
Pete, also,
so again, the parents want to play mommy and daddy, and that's a bad sign.
Pete, you have 7 children. How many times, I mean, a 5-year-old, you say you're going to school. You don't have an option. And you put your child in the car and you take them to school. It's pretty easy to send a 5-year-old to school.
That's old. Exactly. Ainsley, I mean, that's only parents. That's only parents. A 5-year-old, it doesn't know up from down. It is the parents getting them dressed, getting their snack, getting them in the car, dropping them off, walk them to their class, make sure they stay. How far? What are they doing? Fleeing, prison breaking in kindergarten? No, it's the parents who are ensuring that they're there. Hold the parents accountable. Find the parents. Figure it out. But handing money to a kid and the fact that this is a bipartisan proposal in the Ohio legislature. By the way, they already spend $12,000 a pupil in Ohio and $4,000 higher than that, almost $16,000 in some inner cities in Ohio.
Pete, I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot, but the success of Poison Ivy is still out there. Might you do something like Poison Kindergarten?
Poison Kindergarten. That's next, Brian. Stay tuned. Fox
Thank
Nation.
you, Pete.
Ohio law. Ohio lawmakers propose paying students to attend school and graduate. Interesting concept, right? So, and wait to hear Tom's view on this as a parent, and it may surprise some of you. So, Ohio lawmakers Bill Seitz and Danny Isaacson have introduced bipartisan legislation proposing a pilot program set to launch in 2024-2025 school year, which will reward students for good attendance as a measure to combat chronic absenteeism. The program, to be administered by the State Department of Education and Workforce, aims to provide cash transfers to select kindergarten and ninth grade students in Ohio. Students with a 90% or higher attendance will receive $25 cash transfers every 2 weeks, followed by $150 at the end of each quarter, and a final reward of $500 at the end of school year if they maintain the attendance criteria. Additionally, the lawmakers are suggesting a graduation incentive pilot program in the same academic year, offering students from select schools up to $750 for graduating with high GPAs, with the goal of improving graduating rates. Tom.
I love this. Ohio finally makes an economic decision. Here's an economic decision. I read, just looked it up, that the incarceration rate for county jail, now we're not talking about federal prisons,
Right.
county jail,
Right.
costs the taxpayers $36,000 per year.
Per person.
Per person.
Yeah.
So in other words, to have one bed in that jail, county jail, and this is where, by the way, if you get a DUI, you may be 2 days there, or you may have to go to court and have 14 days there. This is county. And this is where a lot of first and second time offenders of drug possession and things end up. They're not in the federal prison system yet. So they're looking at this and saying, how do we give an incentive here's a novel term, an allowance. This is basically an allowance to students to stay in attendance, because staying in school and not dropping out has a direct correlation with their ability to earn money, and a direct correlation with how many times they get busted for petty theft or things like this.
Mm-hmm.
So if they stay in school, it's better. It's better for society. So Ohio is saying, wait a minute. I don't know if they're thinking this way, but this is the way I think. Hey, instead of putting $36,000 a year on the taxpayer, why don't we spread it out and give these kids an incentive to stay in school and attend? And instead of welfare check, you're giving attendance check. I think this is a great idea.
What do you think, Vinny?
Well, I mean, it's a good idea in that sense to try to get them there. But what's to say that these people, these bad kids, are just going to show up just to get the money? It's not going to make them want to learn or be better people. If I knew, listen, I'm going to make $1,000 or $750, like $7, I just come, Patrick, and I would just sit there. I'd still be, if I was a menace and wanted to skip and go do crazy stuff, I'm just going to do it in the school now.
You know what? I think it's missing two steps, in my opinion. What I think is good about this idea is they're going the right there. So while Tom was talking and looking at all these, he said $36,000 per year per person that's in jail. I looked at what Ohio's rate is for the number of people that go to jail. It's $659. Rob, if you can pull this up, $659 per 100,000 is what their number of $659 per 100,000. Ohio has a population of 11.78 million, which means that roughly 77,000. There it is, $659 per 100,000. And they have 77,000 people in jail. If you take 77,000 people in jail times 36,000, you know what that is? That is $2.79 billion. $2.79 billion a year to the state.
Wow.
That's a lot of money, right? Okay. And who pays for that?
Sales tax.
Sales tax, right? Okay. No problem. So am I willing to pay $25 every 2 weeks and $150 end of each quarter and $500 end of the year for having 90% attendance? No, maybe I'll create tiers. And here's how I would do it. I would do tier one is you have to be there and get a minimum of C's at the bottom. Okay. So worst case, you get all C's. You get 1D, you ain't getting your $25.
Smart.
Got to be C or higher. Okay.
I like that.
Then if you go no C's and B's and higher, I go $50. And then you get straight A's, I go $100. And then if you're in the top 5, I'll create tiers in the class 5 gets this, 4 gets this, 3 gets this. Number 1 gets $5,000. Okay, and that $5,000 will be used for college, whatever, scholarship, right? The only thing I have a problem with this is kindergarten. If the kid is late to kindergarten, it's on the parent. It's got nothing to do.
Yeah.
So I would change this from the age where the kid can come to school. Maybe I'd start at junior high school from 6th grade. The hell am I doing paying bonuses for kindergartners? They don't even know what the hell is going on. Parents are going to take that money and say, thank you. It's not the kid's money. It's going to go to the parents' money. There's a part of this I like, incentive program to provide and produce the right habits. I'm for that.
Well, I think at that point you can tax the adult for everybody saying your kid's going to get in a fight with his dad. All
You
of a
owe
sudden.
us the 25.
Let's go, buddy. I'm going to make 25 bucks today. But I think anything that encourage an incentive program to encourage showing school to learn and getting better grades, I think is great. If you take a bigger perspective of what's going on in the education system, I think we're all recognizing whatever the current structure of the education system, specifically the public education system, ain't working, Chico. So they got to figure out something that's a little bit more vibrant and sort of restructure what's going on out there. Incentive programs for sure, attendance for sure, good grades for sure.
Do you have any ideas? Anything?
Well, yeah, I do. Well,
get to the idea because we got stories.
Well, I want to understand something.
Yeah.
If you look at what's going on in the college system, because basically high school is just a farm system to go to college, right? We all know that college at this point is a scam. If you look at the numbers for college, Americans are overwhelmingly losing faith in colleges. In 2013, 74% said that it was important to go to college. Now it's 41%. People don't believe that it's important to go to college anymore. People in same year, 2013, is college going in the right direction or the wrong direction? 61% said wrong direction, 38% right direction. So it starts with the elementary schools, it starts with the middle schools, it starts with the high schools, incentivizing the right behavior, incentivizing why you're there, incentivizing why you're learning. So when you go there, last point, recognition. We do a monthly recognition at Valuetainment. Hey, you did a great job with the editor. Hey, your channel's growing. Hey, you're crushing it. And everyone gets up, they clap, they get a gift certificate, they get a football, whatever it is. It's important to recognize the kids that are showing up and doing well in school.
And one parting shot here is the state of Florida has a thing called the Bright Futures Program. And the Bright Futures Program in the state of Florida, if you get a 3.5 GPA, and this is any school, Pat, any school. So even if you're in a troubled school, right, you're in a really tough high school, low academic standards there, you get a 3.5 GPA and you do, I think it's 100 service hours, the state of Florida will give you a free education at Florida State, University of Florida, or UCF, the state schools. So Florida got with this program a while ago to encourage kids coming from moderate incomes. Hey, just get a 3.5.
Incentives work. The right incentives work. And by the way, you know what I don't understand is why? Who was the number one student last year in the state of Florida?
The number one.
Who was the number one student last year in the state of Florida? Who was the number 10? Who had the highest GPA in the state of Florida? What kids last year got 1,600 on their SATs in the state of Florida or Texas or California or New York? Why don't we know that stuff? Why doesn't the state tweet it out? Well, you mean to tell me parents wouldn't recognize it? I don't think this. When they asked me what is the biggest problem that's going on the last 4 years, I said number one problem we have in America is a hero making machine. If we're not doing the hero making machine recognition, I want to know which kids crushed it and have media talk about it.
Especially when you talked about, that was the one, especially about teachers and giving them shout outs and letting us know. But by the way, this could backfire because if you're in Ohio and you're a parent, you're like, I don't want to work. I'm going to pump out 10 kids, put them all in school every year. Like you keep your ass in school. That's a paycheck.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough money to pay the bills. I get what you're saying. If they get it to that point, you go right.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.
Okay, fathers, what are your thoughts? 3 excellent videos. Felt like they needed to be shared. That's the introduction of our live stream today, paying students to attend school. So what are your thoughts on that, fathers? Very interesting. As a former teacher and dean of students, my opinion is very simplistic. It's very simple. I don't have a problem with the incentive piece of having students attend school. And let me explain why. Working in the criminal justice system for 20 years, being a criminal justice professional, seeing the kids that I seen in the criminal justice system that got screwed over by their parents, got screwed over by the criminal justice system, got screwed over by society, got screwed over by their parents. I don't have a problem with this at all, because what I do recognize is when these kids end up in the criminal justice system, from the school to prison pipeline, the government's going to make the ultimate decision anyway. That's the reality. See, there's no gray area in that at all. So what I've never done professionally is I've never gotten caught up in the politics. When you're dealing with government agencies, you're dealing with the hierarchy within those agencies. And individually, myself, as a criminal justice professional, I hated every aspect of that, because it's nothing but a game. You're playing with young people's lives, right? So many of these kids will end up in the foster care system and end up not graduating high school anyway. So I don't have a problem with incentives, right? But I also don't have a problem with holding parents 100% accountable for their children. That's a big piece that's missing. So what ends up happening is when these kids end up in the criminal justice system, so many parents aren't held accountable. They just aren't. So when the government steps in, they swoop your child up, start making decisions, and hey, your children are going to end up where the government says they end up. So it's very interesting what Ohio has proposed. I'm going to follow up on this. I'm not sure if they've already passed that legislation. I believe this video that I showed with Ohio is 7 months old. So I'm sure if that happened the beginning of the year, that legislation should already pass. I should have did the research on that already to see if the legislation has already passed. But this is the newest video that I came across doing my research from the state of Ohio, wanting to pay students to attend school. So very interesting, fathers of daughters. I wanted to share these 3 videos. The next videos I'm getting ready to share with you, fathers, are talking about Title I money and what is Title I money and how schools are publicly funded through the federal government. These next videos are excellent videos. So I leave the professionals, let them explain how it works. Because most parents are unaware of where the money comes from the federal government and how it's extended out through the schools and the school districts and Department of Education. So this education I'm getting ready to share with you, fathers of daughters, is very important, not just for you, but for your families, for your wives, for your family, for family members. Because I can guarantee you 90% of the public doesn't understand how school funding works at all. They don't. So this is what I'm sharing with you. Okay, fathers. Okay, fathers, give me a second. The video that I'm looking for is not coming up. Give me a second here, fathers. Let me try. Hold on. Give me 1 second, fathers. Okay, let me try something else. Okay, fathers of daughters, I've got the video I'm looking for. I apologize. Technology, you know how it works? You know how it works. Okay, fathers of daughters, first video on Title I, federal funding to schools.
Because the median income varies by state and local community, funding for education is not equal. Title I is a federal education program that financially supports schools that have a high percentage of children from low-income families, as determined by the number of students who qualify for free or discounted lunch. In 2021, about 59,000 of the approximate 98,000 schools in operation qualified for Title I funds. To meet the needs of disadvantaged students, Title I schools emphasize parent involvement and send home school parent compacts, asking parents to pledge to commit to sharing responsibility for student learning, providing an action plan for forging stronger family, school, and community partnerships. School advisory committees decide on how Title I funds are used. Consider joining yours. At your next school community meeting, ask, which students are benefiting the most from public spending and how do we know? To ensure that funds are distributed equitably, keep attending meetings on educational spending in your community.
What you hear about how your schools are funded really depends on who you ask. If you listen to some people in Tallahassee, they'll tell you funding is up, which is sort of true. But if you listen to someone who works in a large urban school district in Florida, like Duval, we'll tell you funding is down, and that's true too. So what's the whole truth? Florida public schools funding is overly complicated. But essentially, there are two types of funds. Discretionary funds are dollars the school district can use for any of its operating costs. It's how we pay teachers and school principals and buy supplies and instructional resources for kids. For example, it takes discretionary dollars to keep teachers' salaries competitive and to meet the rising cost of healthcare. The second type of funds are called categorical funds. These funds can only be used for specific purposes, as dictated by the legislature. For example, if Tallahassee gives you money to buy computers, you can't use it to buy STEM supplies. Same goes if the state were to give us funds for mental health. That's all you can use it for. But here's the catch. The discretionary money used to pay our day-to-day bills is going down. The categorical money is going up. And that's how school funding is going both up and down at the same time. Let's take a closer look at what this means for Duval County Public Schools. Our discretionary funding for the 2018-2019 school year is about the same as it was last year. But factor in inflation for things like custodial services, fuel costs, and even raises for teachers. Well, you get the picture. When funding is flat, it's really a decrease or a cut. Tallahassee did send us some new cash in the categorical funding category. But remember, how we can spend that money has already been predetermined by your state legislature. It's kind of like if your boss gives you a gift card to buy a pair of shoes. But if the gift card is only enough to cover the cost of one shoe and not the whole pair, it's not much of a gift. And it's not like you can use that money for anything else, like your rent. So even if your boss calls that gift a raise, it really isn't. That's Florida educational funding. A few partial gift cards and no real raises. Those state officials rarely give us enough funding to cover the full cost of the law. So, school districts like Duval have to dig deeper into operational funding to pay those costs. That's called an unfunded mandate, and we've got plenty. Take, for instance, the new law that requires all districts to put an armed employee on each school campus. Unless we're willing to arm our teachers, which we're not, we need to hire enough security assistants to work at more than 100 schools, which will cost close to $4.2 million. But the state is only giving us about $3.5 million. The result is an unfunded mandate of over $600,000. With flat or declining operating revenue and ever-increasing unfunded mandates, Duval County Public Schools currently faces a budget deficit of $62 million. And with a budget cut like that, there are going to have to be some changes. Change is often hard, and changes forced because of a budget shortfall are often the hardest. While we at Duval County Public Schools will continue to do everything we can to minimize the impact in the classroom, you really have to ask Tallahassee, is this what an increase in school funding really looks like?
Here in the Kansas City metro area, it seems like school funding is always in the news. But how well do you understand it? And what can you do to influence it? Take Note is here to help. You've probably heard it said, the devil is in the details. Well, that's literally the case here. In the 1600s, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, they enacted what they called the Old Deluder Satan Law. It essentially said literacy was vital. Otherwise, kids couldn't read the Bible. And if they couldn't read the Bible, the more likely they'd be deluded by the devil. The law went on to make it clear. Funding for schools was the responsibility of the inhabitants in general, because everyone would benefit. So when we here at Take Note talk about our city, our schools, our future, the our portion, including responsibility for funding, goes back hundreds of years. Fast forward to the 20th century, when Brown versus Board of Education made it clear that racially segregated schools weren't equal schools. That made them illegal. But Brown versus Board of Education did not equalize public schools in terms of funding. If you lived in a poverty-stricken neighborhood, your schools were probably underfunded. Now, if you lived in a rich neighborhood, your education was likely of a higher quality because much of the money was coming from property taxes. But in 1973, San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5-4. There was no right to equal funding in the U.S. Constitution. Now, state constitutions, that was another matter, which is why virtually every state Supreme Courts, including Kansas and Missouri, have handled or continue to handle lawsuits regarding equal and or adequate school funding. So what percentage of monies come from federal, state, and local governments? Generally, we're talking about a 10-45 split. I say generally because Missouri, for example, is a 10-31-59 split. Kansas, 10-52-38. Now, the expenses are broken down into two categories, capital and operational. Think of it as the difference between a school teacher and a school building, or turning on the lights in a classroom, or putting in new electrical wires. Likewise, at the ballot box, when you vote on increased levies, you're voting on operational monies that, say, could be used to increase teacher salaries or hire more teachers. Now, when you vote on bond issues, you're voting on capital expenditures, like construction of a new facility. So while you may be well aware of important issues at the federal level, How well acquainted are you with your local school board? And are you turning out to vote when the sexiest things on the ballot are levies and bond issues? If you're not, as the old law says, the devil may be deluding you. Remember, this is our city, our schools, our future. This is Take Note. So join the conversation. We want to hear from you.
Investing in arts education is one of the most important things that a school system can do. It was an incredibly important decision that my leadership team made with me to make sure that we use arts education as a key strategy for how our students will achieve, not just in school, but in life.
Both my parents were teachers. I grew up a child of a history teacher and an industrial arts teacher. And I loved being around that world, seeing the impact that they could have on kids on a daily basis. And it was something I knew I always wanted to do.
Very nice. Right? So you can see everybody's looks different. If you look around at your neighbors, you're going to notice that yours is different than theirs. And that's okay.
So I came to Zamorano 5 years ago. At that time, I went to our district, my budget analyst, and I said, hey, I have right now about 40% of my English language learners that are not achieving. My African American students were not achieving. And through all the research and what I have studied and seen, I knew that kids could advance with the arts and developing that.
The professional development is really incredibly important these days, especially here in California, because so many of our new teachers haven't had arts in their own background, K through 12. And in fact, so many teachers in schools, because the arts have been cut, haven't had the practice of engaging with the arts. So the professional development is even more important to give them arts experiences and to help them find ways to be creative and inventive and innovative in how they teach.
Well, the difference with this one is we can, in planning my lessons, I always have to ask myself, do I like this lesson? I would end up taking an area out of it that I really like and think about something that the children are into, that I might be into also, and then mold it into the lesson. And in this way, we're both having a good time. It becomes meaningful to both of us. Look at this. I see people getting ready for this.
We're specifically tying our strategies to attendance rates, suspension and expulsion rates.
We'll be getting at some of those things like persistence to task, resilience, their ability to try, even when sometimes they may not have been successful. Those kinds of things that I think are so well done through the arts.
For a long time, I have built my lessons more along the lines of art for art's sake. But now we're starting to work more collaboratively with our grade level teachers in aligning our lessons with Common Core standards.
And I get to look at the state standard, and the classroom teacher does too, and says, well, Melanie, I want to teach this and that. And I'll look at it, or I can look at what elements I'd like to take out of the lesson and then create another art lesson, an art lesson that would help them to comprehend and understand what the standard is asking for.
What we've seen in the research is that kids who have the opportunity to learn in the arts have amazing academic achievement. Why wouldn't we want that for all kids? We see kids who learn through the arts who attend school more often. Why wouldn't we want to see that? We see kids engaged in the arts and they are thinking, they are becoming more confident, they have self-esteem, they are thinking outside the box, they're taking risks, they're becoming articulate. I mean, it's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful thing.
I believe that with the arts integration and with the 22 schools that have taken on this challenge and with the high level engagement when they're getting the arts and the integrated arts in the classroom, I truly believe we're going to see the academic achievement go up at all the schools.
This lesson is a little bit math.
It is.
This lesson is a little bit math.
It is complicated. It's a very complicated system.
And a little bit history.
I was there. I can tell you exactly what happened.
We'll start here. How Texas public schools are funded.
It's really a equal share on behalf of the state of Texas as well as the local taxation of property taxpayers.
Public schools get money from the state and from local property owners through property tax. Each has its own formula. In state funding, there's something called a basic allotment.
And that is, in essence, the funding that is guaranteed per pupil to every district, across every campus in the state.
That dollar amount is $6,160 per student. The basic allotment does not change year after year, even if costs do. The last time the amount was adjusted by the state was in 2019. The allotment is not given to schools based on how many students are enrolled, but rather how many students show up.
It's called ADA, average daily attendance. It's basically the number of students on average that come to school each and every day. That's how school districts receive their funding.
In addition to the basic allotment, there are weights. Those weights mean the dollar amount goes up in some cases.
Some students that have special needs cost more to educate than others. For example, there will be a career technical education weight that is a little bit more than, say, your general education weight because of the materials, the cost of equipment. It's just a more expensive program to run.
So now we have basic allotment plus weights plus property taxes. But property taxes paid within a school district don't always stay within that district.
You've probably heard a lot about the Edgewood cases.
Here comes the history.
I was there for the walkout in '68. I started teaching when there was no monies in Edgewood.
Diana Herrera was a teacher in Edgewood ISD for 30 years. She was a junior at Edgewood High School in 1968 when roughly 450 students walked out of class, demanding more equitable school funding. The fight began, Diana says, when Edgewood students who wanted to go to college realized they didn't meet the requirements.
So as they start looking into it, they find that many of our teachers were not degreed. Many of them were not certified.
School facilities were also lacking.
No hot water, no fans, the library was minimally used, poor science labs, and on and on and on and on.
An Edgewood parent, Demetrio Rodriguez, seen here with his sons, filed a lawsuit. He's standing in front of Edgewood Elementary, where the top floor was closed because rain and bats would find their way in. That lawsuit led to the creation of MALDEF.
The Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and it was started here in San Antonio in 1968.
The same year as the student walkout.
And then at that point in '68, they were going to cross U.S. Highway 90. So by that time, the SAPD is around, but to our great satisfaction, SAPD were Edgewood grads. Many of the police officers were Edgewood grads. So what they did is they held back traffic on Highway 90 and let these kids walk by and cross over. As soon as they cross over, well, the Edgewood main office is there.
There was a federal court lawsuit back in 1968 through 1973, which really was Edgewood compared to Alamo Heights, and then expanded to look at the whole state, poor districts versus rich districts.
Ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Texas school funding. Then came 1984 and a different lawsuit. Despite the passage of roughly 2 decades, the suit dealt with a lot of the same issues.
Their schools, the physical buildings were in worse shape than the other schools, that they didn't have enough teachers. They had too many teachers on emergency certificates. And to make it even worse, these poor districts generally had more students who cost more to educate. I worked on it from 1984 to 2002, went to the Texas Supreme Court 4 times.
The lawsuit was Edgewood ISD versus Kirby, the state's education commissioner at the time. In 1989, the Texas Supreme Court ruled in favor of Edgewood.
So the Texas Supreme Court found that this system was not efficient. It wasted a lot of state money. It was not equalized, didn't give equal rights to students in poor districts and rich districts, and therefore it violated the Texas Constitution.
But the court didn't tell lawmakers how to fix those violations. Some changes were made,
which did put some more money into the system, but didn't really equalize.
So MALDEF filed another lawsuit.
We call it Edgewood 2 sometimes.
There was even a 3 and a 4 until 1995.
And basically in 95 was the first time the legislature came up with a system that the Texas Supreme Court approved of.
And that's recapture.
And that was recapture, yes.
The process of recapture is still used by the state of Texas today, though now it's called excess revenue. It puts schools into 2 categories, those that must spread the wealth and those that need some of that money. Schools that have what the state deems an excess must send the money back to the state, and then Texas redistributes it. It's a system that's been dubbed Robin Hood by some. To calculate how much money a district must send back, the state compares a district's property tax revenue to what's called its entitlement. Remember that previous math we did, basic allotment plus weights? That's entitlement. It's the dollar amount the state says a school district is entitled to based on its student population and needs. But property owners have to pay their share first. The difference between entitlement and property tax revenue is how much money the state gives a district. But if property tax revenue is more than the entitlement amount, that's an excess. And that difference goes back to the state. A difference is what Diana noticed once recapture was put in place, thanks to the Edgewood lawsuit.
I saw the first degree PE coach, the first degree librarian. We had never had a degree librarian. The first degree reading teacher, the first degree dyslexic teacher. We had never had a dyslexia teacher ever.
So what does recapture look like on the flip side? Well, let's look at Alamo Heights ISD, for example, a local district that Edgewood parents began looking at all those decades ago. In 2022, Alamo Heights had a recapture amount of nearly $34 million. That was nearly 47% of the district's property tax revenue. More than 30 years after the landmark outcome of the Edgewood ISD lawsuit, questions about the future of Texas public school funds are still swirling. School voucher plans, unfunded safety mandates from the state, property tax compression, and more.
Why are we not adequately funding and especially supporting our classroom teachers in particular with appropriate funding when we know that the funding is there?
They continue to demand and mandate, and yet they continue to cut.
Hello, everybody. Stefania Jimenez here. Thank you so much for watching KSAT's YouTube channel. Keep up to date with all of San Antonio's top news, weather, and so much more by clicking the like and subscribe buttons below. And once again, thanks for watching KSAT.
Okay, fathers, what are your thoughts about those videos on Title I funding to schools? It's very interesting how the different states have come up with their own plans to fund public education. I find it very, very interesting. And parents, this is where you have to be involved at your local and state levels, knowing what's going on with the school boards. You know, so many parents are they're just disengaged. They're totally disengaged. And then when decisions are being met, they're wondering, well, what the hell is going on? Well, if you don't participate, you're not supposed to know everything, parents. We understand that. I'm a parent. I made sure, though, that I was aware of what was going on with my children's schools in the school district in which they were going to schools. You pay the property taxes, right? So you need to be aware of what's going on with your school boards and who's sitting on your school boards, because you vote them in. Whether you vote or not, they're being voted in. So, you know, you have to be aware, parents. You can't sit back and allow the government to make these decisions and you're just like blindsided and you don't know what's going on. This is why parent-teacher conferences are so important at every level, elementary and middle school. They're very important. Parent groups are important. There's always activism and activists, regardless of your economics. In these parent groups, there's grassroots organizations in all communities of color. So parents, you have to take the lead and you have to be informed of what's going on, man. You just can't be relying on folks, and you have to read and you have to do your own research as well. With social media platforms, like myself, I'm a resource, right? But you have to do the research. You know, as a father of daughters, right, I get a lot of comments from men that don't like what I'm doing. But you know, it's interesting, when I get these comments, I always go to their YouTube channels. 95% of these men that are making comments, they don't even have children, but they're talking shit about, I don't know what I'm talking about, and blase this, blase that. I mean, they're talking shit, but they don't have children, but they got something to say. It's just crazy to me. If you're not about research, studies, and solutions, why are you making comments? Why? I'm curious with that, because I got a problem with shit talkers, man. I got a problem with computer warriors, fathers or non-fathers sent behind a keyboard and running their mouths, but they don't provide a solution. That's not how I get down at all. Never have, never will. So if you're not part of the solution, man, shut the hell up, for real. I mean, anybody could sit back and talk foolishness and nonsense. Solutions require a lot of work. Analytically thinking, analytical thoughts. You're going to be pushed out your comfort zone. It's not always going to appear fair. But if you're in the best interest of all students, that's fair. Okay, fathers. So we have 2 videos left, and then I'm going. The next 2 videos are speaking about trade school versus college. These are both excellent videos, fathers of daughters, and they need to be shared as part of paying students to attend schools, because all of our children are not going to be interested in going to college. They're just not. In trade schools, I've always supported trade schools, because I know when I was a probation officer, and I know when I worked in K-12 education, I came across so many kids where they were just great with their hands. You know, they had uncles that were mechanics, or they had aunts that had worked in just very other fields other than, you know, professional fields, blue collar jobs. You know, I tell people all the time, I have 4 adult daughters, and I've told my adult daughters this. I pray to God that they marries a man that has a blue collar job. I prefer that my own daughters marry a man that has a blue collar job. And let me explain why. My experience, men that are blue collar workers, they go to work every day. They love their wives, they love their families, and then they come home. They're not trying to hang out with the foolishness and nonsense. They're not trying to have all these women on the side and do all this crazy stuff. They're not. They love their families because their families are their priority. That's my experience of knowing blue collar men. And I've told my daughters, I pray for each of my 4 daughters. I pray that they marry a blue collar worker. I really, really do. Because all the blue collar men I know, they love their families. They go to work every day. They take care of their kids. They're investing in their wives. They're investing in their homes. They know how to take care of stuff at the house. They know how to fix stuff. They ain't outsourcing. They ain't trying to live above their means. They're not trying to chase the Joneses. So I pray that my daughters marry blue collar men. You know, they're going to do what they're going to do, but they know if I have my say, they would all marry blue collar men. They go to work every day. When they leave the house, they come home at night. That's just my experience. Okay, fathers, let's take a look at these last two videos.
More and more Gen Zers are saying no to four-year college. More and more Gen Zers are saying no to four-year colleges and universities and saying yes to traditional trades like welding and plumbing. A new article in the Wall Street Journal explored the reasons behind Gen Z's move to become the quote-unquote tool belt generation and how they could be the solution to the shortage of skilled workers in the United States. The author of that piece, Wall Street Journal reporter T-Ping Chen, joins us now to talk about it. This is fascinating. And we've heard it's not new.
No, I feel like there
have been spikes when this has become a thing. But I'm curious, what is it about this particular point in time that has these young people looking more and more at vocational schools and trades? And which are the jobs that you found are the most popular?
Yeah. So first of all, college is expensive. It's been getting more expensive. And for generations, we have had this idea of college for all. That has really been something that, you know, we've pushed on a lot of students to think that you've got to go to college. And if you don't, you know, there's no real alternate path to success. At the same time, we are living in a really uncertain world with the rise of AI, with a tough job market out there for a lot of college grads. We're seeing a lot of employers do things like drop their college education requirements as we face sort of a skills mismatch in this country. At the same time, we're seeing figures like, for example, there was a recent study out by Burning Glass Institute and Strong Education Foundation, which found actually that among college graduates, half of them are actually working in jobs where bachelor's degrees aren't even needed. And so, not surprisingly, all that is conspiring to create a feeling of skepticism. Do I need to go to four-year college to be successful? Do I want to take on that debt? Is it the only path? Are there alternate paths out there? And so if you look at some of the figures, at a macro level, we are talking about last year a 16% jump actually in enrollment in vocational focused community colleges. And that's the highest, if you look at overall enrollment, it's actually at the highest level since the National Student Clearinghouse started tracking this data in 2018.
Wow, that's really, sorry, go ahead. No, this is also fascinating. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you asked about what programs are the most popular. If you look at if you break it down, you can see, for example, with construction trades, that's one area that has seen a pretty striking jump since in that time period since 2018 of around 23%. Likewise, vehicle maintenance and programs in HVAC, vehicle maintenance and repair and install and all that, it's gone up by 7%. So those are some of the more popular areas.
You know, we're both children of immigrants, right? And I think a lot of people who are children of immigrants experience this thing where, you know, your parents are like, you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, like, you know, it's got to be this. And I remember arguing with my mom and saying, well, maybe I don't want to go to college. Maybe I want to try something different. And it just like could not. Her mind could not accept that.
It was basically, you can, if you want to be a welder, you can do that after you go to college.
Right, basically. But I'm curious now if, you know, the views are changing when people think about the trades, when they think about plumbing, welding, electrical jobs. You know, what are the impressions that people have?
That's a really good question. So 100%, that stigma still exists, I would say. If you think about, we're living in a society where for generations we have that sense that college is the optimal, right? And anything other than that is less than. And not surprisingly, that does show up still when we're talking about attitudes, even among, younger workers, Gen Z, et cetera. If you look at survey data, you can see that the strong majority of Gen Z would be interested in vocational schools offering paid on-the-job training, which is a lot of how you get into the skilled trades. But at the same time, you see around 3/4 of them also saying that there is a stigma associated with going to trade school versus a 4-year path. That said, I would say that that stigma is changing when you speak to high school counselors across the country. They will tell you that for years, shop class, this idea of vocational education has been perceived as something for kids who are the troublemakers or the kids who aren't really academically on track, they can't hack it, et cetera. But there has also at the same time been rising, new technologies, whether it's in robotics or new machine tooling technologies that have come online that are in many cases helping change this impression of some of these skilled trades.
So TP, real quick before we go, this may be an unpopular sort of thought process, but it's also that there are a lot of colleges in this country and not all colleges are equal. That's something that Paul Fussell wrote about many, many years ago in a great book called Class, which is that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of universities now, so they may not be the choice for a lot of young people. This is a fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
We got to leave it there, though. Thank you so much for your article. It was really great. Thanks for joining us.
So what exactly is the job? Climb it, clean it? So what exactly is the job? Climb it, clean it, come down.
Yeah.
You guys all work for the county, I guess, or the city, or how?
No, we're from North Carolina.
Well, what are you doing here?
They're the ones that got us to do it.
You do this all over the country?
Yeah.
I see. So you guys are the team that goes around the country cleaning these things.
Right.
Well, that was Mike Rowe, the Emmy Award-winning host and creator of the hit TV show Dirty Jobs. And over the years, Mike has highlighted hundreds of workers in these essential industries. And his foundation has awarded over $6 million in scholarships for students from 48 states to go to trade schools. And he is passionately committed to reinvigorating these skilled trade jobs. And he is here with us today. And I'm so happy you're here with us on our network-wide series on education, The American Classroom. You have no idea, Mike, how close to home this hits for me. My brother went to trade school, became a journeyman plumber, owns his own business, and has a beautiful life. So when I hear you say society is making a terrible mistake by only promoting this college education as a #1 goal, I understand what you're saying.
I'm glad you do. And if it's any consolation, I probably hear the same thing from 200 or 300 people a week. This is a giant issue. And it's not a question of college being bad or really anything like that. It's really a question of cookie cutter advice. And what happens to a country when we tell millions of kids that the best path for the most people is the most expensive path, and that they're going to have a terrible time being happy and living a well-balanced life if they don't get this all-important degree. It's the root cause, I'm afraid, of a lot of unintended consequences, including $1.7 trillion in student loans and 11 million open jobs today, most of which don't require a 4-year degree. We just need to do a better job of making a more persuasive case for the opportunities that actually exist.
Well, on that persuasion, Mike, why do you think that some of these skilled trades, so-called blue-collar jobs, are looked down on? And how would you work to change that?
Look, I mean, the honest answer is a 400-page book I can't get around to finishing, but it has a lot to do with the perfectly normal instinct of wanting our kids to have something better than what we did. Problem is, we don't really know what better means. And when you talk about a lot of these jobs, you're talking about jobs that are out of sight and oftentimes out of mind. But more importantly, you're talking about jobs that have giant stigmas and stereotypes and myths and misperceptions all around them. My foundation has helped train nearly 1,800 people. Many of them are welders, and many, many of them are making over six figures. We see this again and again, day after day. Plumbing, steam fitting, pipe fitting, heating, air conditioning, electric. Those basic trades are not being outsourced. They're not going the way of AI. They're not going the way of robots. They need real people. We need real people to do this work. And at the moment, our workforce is wildly out of balance. For every 5 tradesmen who retire this year, 2 will replace them. It's been like that for nearly 20 years. It's troubling math, as they say.
Certainly, and we're talking about such important jobs here. I mean, anyone watching knows that they've had to call a plumber or an electrician or a mechanic before. So why do you think that kids aren't going for these jobs anymore?
I think part of it has to do with the fact that, for reasons I still don't quite understand, we took shop class out of high school about 35 or 40 years ago. And when we did that, we removed from view all optical representation of entire categories of work. We turned these jobs into vocational consolation prizes. And we really put our thumb on the scale in a way that not only elevated a 4-year degree, but elevated it at the expense of all other forms of education. And so we've just seen a reckoning, and we're seeing it right now. You mentioned plumbers. It's a really good point, because today, I'm happy to say the conversation is not just between labor and management or companies who are looking to hire people who want to do this kind of work. The conversation is finally starting to involve people like you and me and millions of others who share our addiction to smooth roads and affordable energy and reliable electricity and indoor plumbing. We've all got skin in this game, right? And so the question really is becoming more and more not, wow, can you really make 6 figures as a plumber? All day long. The question is, how long do you want to wait for one?
Right. Right. Everyone go out and hug their plumber today. Mike Rowe, thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate your time and your message. Truly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Okay, fathers. Excuse me. Another live stream, fathers. Paying students to attend school. This was needed and was necessary. This is for fathers with daughters, but anyone can learn from this particular live stream. It's a good one. And share a lot of valuable information for all parents, not just fathers of daughters. And, like I said, if I have a say in who my daughter's marrying, blue collar, but I don't have a say. So, hey, wishing is hopeful, I guess. Anyway, fathers, I appreciate you. For those of you that were here today, thank you for being available. Thank you for being present. And I live stream once a week, fathers of daughters. So, thank you for being a part of it today, and appreciate you, Father. So, mis amigos, hasta la semana que viene. Paz. Adios. Okay, fathers. Till next week, I'll holla at you. This is Ephraim B. Martin. And you know what we do here at Grow Dad YouTube channel. I'm out. Peace.